Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we interview experts from around the world on such subjects as presentation skills, visibility, leadership, and communication challenges. This episode is the fourth of 4 podcast episodes in the Visible and Valued Training series, where we are featuring Whitney McDuff, who is a PR specialist, to talk about how, if you're a busy executive, how do you actually get booked? Whitney McDuff is known as the speaker's secret weapon. She works with purpose-driven leaders to build visible, credible, and profitable brands through public speaking and public relations. She lives in Charleston, South Carolina, and she has won the Best of Charleston Award. And her clients have been showcased on stages around the world, recognized by Forbes, ABC, NBC, CBS, Marvel Networks, the ESPN, Newsweek, USA Today, and the Huffington Post. She also has clients who've been placed in European and global magazines, so global publications. Whitney likes to guide leaders to create measurable and meaningful impact by monetizing their genius. Whether they lack the confidence or the roadmap, she passionately provides both. She's also the author of 2 best-selling children's books, The Lolly Tree and Where the Lollies Go. You can check her out at whitneymcduff.com, but best of all, just stay online because she is my guest, and we had so much fun talking about how do you actually get booked? What are the mistakes that people make? And when you're really busy, how can you get help and get onto the stages that are going to make a big impact in your career? So let's go to the interview with Whitney McDuff. Whitney McDuff, I'm so happy to have you on Speakers Who Get Results. Finally.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I've been saving you up actually because I knew that when we were going to do the Visible and Valued Training Month, I wanted to finish off with how do you actually get booked? Mm-hmm. But before we dive into that, let me ask you what I ask everyone else, which is if you were to have a dream interview with someone who's no longer with us, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
Oh my goodness. So I am like you. I love talking to interesting people. But if I had to choose one, I would say Da Vinci. I think
Leonardo da Vinci?
Yes.
Okay.
I think everyone should be listening to that interview simply because it's very hard to think of someone who has been more influential in nearly every aspect of our lives, from art to science to literature to philosophy. He just really was an anomaly of a human being. And I would love to hear his own insights on how he thinks about things and how he sees the world. Because I think if we all had a little more of that, the world at large would be a much better place. He just seemed constantly curious, and I think that's a really good place to be in. But his other strength that I think is so amazing was his ability to execute on these incredible ideas. And they really have influenced everything that we've done. He's touched every mark of our society and will continue for generations after generations. And I think he's a fascinating human. And I really would love to pick his brain, as we say.
Yeah. I actually think that would be the sort of thing you want to do an early evening interview.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody goes over and opens up a bottle of wine or three.
Yes.
And then see what happens when you got your feet up. Having those conversations would be almost more fun, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that would be so fascinating. But I would really just ask him, what happens when you wake up in the morning? What is the first thing you think about? What do you try and achieve that day? Because he accomplished so much in his lifetime. I feel like he is the true embodiment of somebody that maximized every minute of their life. And just to understand the mentality behind that, what were the day-to-day routines he had, all of those things that any of us could benefit from knowing more of, because I think we look at the body of his life and his work and it just seems so overwhelming. But then you think about it, it's like, well, he has the same 24 hours in the day that the rest of us do. So what is he doing differently? What are people like Oprah doing differently? Like the Steve Jobs of the world, the Walt Disneys, all of these people who have impacted the world so dramatically. What are they doing differently, and how are they doing it in the same 24 hours that we all have? So that's a question I think about a lot. And I think he's just the epitome of someone who has taken every second of his life and turned it into an influential moment that the rest of us can benefit from.
Yeah. Well, I certainly think one thing is that the people who are with us now in the 21st century are people who have also assembled really good teams to help them.
That's a great
None
point.
of them are doing it all by themselves.
Right.
And I used to beat myself up because here I was, I look at all these people who are doing so much more than I was, I thought. And then when I really got to look at it and I said, okay, these are also people who have help. They've gotten help, and it's okay to ask for help. And
it's a difficult transition for us to make.
Yeah. Of course I could do that myself, but is it really worth time? Is it worth my time? And Da Vinci had his disciples. And I would like to be in that audience to hear that interview. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Who is your person?
I grew up fascinated by Queen Elizabeth because my name is Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth I. I would like to have a conversation with her, but the other one I've often thought of is if I were to have, say, a dinner party, I would like to have 4 or 5 comedians who would be Moliere, Shakespeare, Noel Coward, Oscar Wilde, maybe those 4.
Count me in for that dinner party.
But the thing is, it would either be the best dinner party ever, or it would be the absolute worst dinner party ever, because every single one of them would want to be the only diva. And so that would be the question, is whether you could get the 4 of them to bounce off each other, or whether they would all sit in their 4 little corners in a huff and say, I'm supposed to be the only star. So I don't know. It would be either the best dinner party or the worst dinner party ever.
Well, I'd love to be there to find out.
Yeah, great. So Whitney McDuff, you are a PR expert, and you talk to all sorts of small places like Forbes and little groups like that. And when I've been talking all month about how to use presentation skills to raise your visibility. The best speech in the world does you no good unless you have someplace to give it. And it does take time to find the right speaking gigs. So if you're a busy executive, what could you do to obtain more speaking gigs?
So let's start from the very beginning, right? Because I think a lot of times people are not asking the right question. We all think and we all want to get more visibility. And I'm kind of in this world of speaking and PR because I do PR specifically for speakers. So we're doing a lot of curating gigs for clients, all of that kind of thing. But it really starts with asking the right question. And instead of saying, how can I get more speaking gigs? I really want everyone who's listening, if they have interest in this, to think about a better question. What kind of speaking gigs do you want? Because the second you start narrowing that down, life's going to become a lot easier. I think people get very general. So let's say I want more speaking gigs. Okay, well, one, that's overwhelming to even think about. But let's say I live in Charleston, South Carolina. I want to be a TEDx speaker, and my nearest city that hosts a TEDx event is Charleston, South Carolina. Well, suddenly that becomes a lot easier to figure out what we need to do to make that happen, right? So
exactly.
that's the first thing, is getting really, really specific on what kind of events you want. Because like you said, you can have the best speech in the world, but if you're not on the right stage, it won't matter. Well, the same thing, you can have the best speech, but if you're not in front of the right people, it's not going to have the impact that's worth your time or effort. So getting really, really specific is the first thing. And then the other mindset change that I see a lot that needs to happen with people, they need to be comfortable with understanding that they are a speaker and having that conversation, because your own network is going to be essential if you know how to ask, how often to ask, and again, what to ask for, which goes back to that first question. What specifically are we looking for with speaking gigs? So as you know, Elizabeth, you're a world-renowned speaker. Speaking snowballs, right? So when you do one event,
the more you speak,
the more you speak. That's right.
Yes.
And what people, I think, get really uncomfortable with is just kicking that off. It may be as simple as appearing in front of your social media audience for a few months and just having these conversations and really showcasing your expertise. Because what you're wanting to do, and this is very much on the PR side, what you're wanting to do is constantly remind people that you are an authority in the space. Right. So if you are, let's just say, social media, because everyone has a social media account and that's very easy access to, right? You need to be on there constantly reminding people of your expertise and reminding them that you are a speaker. People very often, I don't know if it's a pride thing or they just don't think about doing it, but reaching out to your network and saying, hey, I am a speaker. I speak on these topics. I would love to be connected to someone who you know who needs this, is very, very powerful. And it's also very, very simple. And yet people are not reaching out to their greatest allies, which are their friends and colleagues. So that would be the easiest thing I would say to do first.
Well, now here's, but, yeah, but, okay. Yeah, but.
I love yeah, buts.
Yeah, I love yeah, buts too. That is great. What I have found is it's important to be really specific. What are you looking for? Because if you say, who do you know who needs this? That's, I don't know who to recommend. I don't know who would like this. But if somebody says, I do, I'm Whitney McDuff and I do PR for speakers, who are the speakers you know who need help? Then I know how to, then I would say, okay, who are the speakers I know who are maybe not as famous as they would like to be?
So this moves into the power of leverage. And I'm glad you brought up specifics about this. Your email list and social media is a great way to communicate with people in your network, right? What I see speakers not doing enough is, one, reminding people that they speak, what they speak about, and who they need to speak to. So for instance, let's say you have, and I'll just use companies that everybody knows. Let's say you have a speaking engagement at Coca-Cola. We need to be talking about that to your audience. We want to thank Coca-Cola for having you. That's wonderful. But we also need to reach out to your network and say, I had the most amazing experience at Coca-Cola. This really impacted them. Does anyone know someone at Pepsi? I'd really love to go talk to Pepsi, and start thinking about the mindset. Okay, how do I leverage this great experience that I had for either something equal or something bigger.
Yeah.
So the other thing that needs to happen a lot is you need to look at people in your own space. So let's say you're a health and wellness speaker and you want to get to more events. Okay, let's go on the back end and let's look at who else is in that space of yours that speaks a lot. Who are they speaking to? Because at that point, we know that these companies that are hiring that person, they have a budget for speakers in that realm. So that starts really narrowing down the field, because if we're too general, it's totally overwhelming to find speaking leads. But the more and more specific we get, okay, so if I'm Whitney McDuff, health and fitness coach, and Elizabeth Bachman, you are someone I aspire to be, I want to look at that list and start reaching out to them and say, hey, I know this is content that your audience loves. I'd like to show you how I'm different and how I do it. We don't ever want to belittle someone else, ever. We want to say, this is how I do it. This is how I can impact your audience. And I know that this is content that you desire. Like, let's talk about what it would look like if I came to speak to you. Start small.
I have often said that the best place to find speaking gigs is from other speakers, and to share, to say it once you've done the gig, once they've hired you, then you say, hey, you know who your next speaker ought to be, and then and be proactive about recommending people. A question for you. I used to think, if you could find the podcasts that your ideal clients were listening to and get on them, you would be getting in front of your ideal clients. But now I think that the podcast world is so enormous. Would it be just as useful to be on a podcast that's more or less in the right area, and then tell your ideal clients to come listen to you?
Yes. So podcasting is amazing for a lot of reasons. As a guest, let's talk about that first. As a guest, podcasting plays two roles. Not only are you getting in front of new audiences, but more importantly, you are reminding your current audience who knows, likes, and trusts you what you speak about and who you're speaking to. So it's that constant subconscious when they're opening up their social feeds and they're opening up their email, they're like, oh my gosh, here is Elizabeth Bachman again, speaking on how to speak and get results. And you subconsciously help people learn how to talk about you, which one of the things you'll hear me say all the time to people, it's not about if you can tell me what you do. It's about if I can tell someone 6 months from now, after 2 glasses of wine, what you do. And the way that happens is I have to hear it all the time. And I think whether people feel like they're driving people nuts talking about themselves, if that's some kind of insecurity, I really want to reassure people of 2 things. One, we get 700,000 marketing messages a day. Like, you are not being too much if you remind someone once a week what your expertise is. And 2, you cannot help people that don't know what you do. So shift that mindset from, I'm talking about myself. It's not about that. It's about the people that you're helping, and you cannot get in front of them if people do not know what you do. So I really want to shift that mindset for people, particularly, coaches and thought leaders. I think there's a lot of mindset stuff around that. And one of my roles is to really shift that and say, no, you are called to the stage because you have spent decades of your life refining this skill set. People need this from you. So let's not be afraid to talk about it and remind people what you're great at, because you're helping the world be a better place. So let's move in that direction.
Okay. Actually, I was going to say, what are the biggest mistakes people made? But I think you've already answered those. So,
other mistakes.
Other mistakes. Well, and if you have a full-time job, for a lot of the executive women that I'm working with, they're busy all day long.
Yes.
They're way overbooked. and they may have families, so they're crazy. How can you find the right speaking gigs that are going to be worth your while without, basically, I would say, ask for help.
Spending
How can
all
you
your
get help?
time.
How can you get help finding the right speaking gigs? Because one thing I know certainly from my clients and from myself is that looking for the right speaking gig is one of those important but not urgent things. It's so easy to put it off. And then suddenly you wake up and 6 months have gone by and you haven't called any of those people on the list. I mean, there may be other people who are more disciplined than I am, but that's what happens to me. Yeah.
Well, so we often feel like we have to do all the things, right? So there's a couple different ways to think about this. One, you can work on social media, refining that message and talking about your expertise that way. So it's more of you're dealing with an influx at that point because so many people know that you're the expert in this. But specifically for your question, we need to invite help, right? What a problem that I see a lot is people try out the gates to send too much to the person that's not making the decision. So they're doing all this work and it essentially will go into the abyss. Outreach from our standpoint normally begins with, okay, we've got to find the gatekeeper, right? They don't need to know like any details. They don't care. These people are busy. They do not care. So we have to think really strategically about what kind of speaking engagements do we want? You know, what is going to be worth it for us? In the past, what speaking engagements have you seen return from? And what can you utilize in your social media and PR plan to remind people all the time that you do speak, right? This is the other thing that people fall apart on, but I'll get to that in a second. So let's think very strategically. So let's say you're a thought leader and TEDx is where you want to go. Just use stuff everybody knows. Okay, we know that. So that's a very specific type of speaking engagement. Okay, what cities are we thinking about that are going to benefit us? Okay, great. And then we send a one-line email. Hey, Amy, contacted this website at this website. Hey, Amy, hope you're having a great day. Who's the best person to talk to about booking this event? That's it. Don't make it long. Don't give them your pitch. None of that. No one cares. And you're going to wear people out before you even get to the person who makes the decisions.
So how do we find the gatekeepers? How do we go past the gatekeepers? That still feels like a lot of work.
Well, it is not a lot of work the more specific you get. Again, this goes back to not being so general. So let's think about precisely where we want to be. And then we're looking at sending 10 emails a week instead of feeling like we have to send 1,000 and that's just overwhelming. And then it goes to the back burner and nothing's ever done.
Right.
But if you can set up a system where, okay, we're going to have a planning meeting with my assistant and think about where we want to go. And my goal is to send out 10 emails a week for the next 3 months. You have to, if you want to have a speaking business, you have to treat it like a business. So there has to be some commitment on the client's part to be willing to take the time to think about where they want to be and be willing to send those short, precise emails and see what comes back next. 9 out of 10 times, people are super helpful and they will help get you where you need to go, which then that's the place to showcase your expertise, share where you've spoken in the past. So that's one way. The other giant mistake that people make that is super easy to course correct is they get some piece of media or they have a small speaking event or a larger one, whatever, and they never share it with their audience again. So like our team, when we take on a client, we strategically, every single podcast they're on, every single speaking event they do, every single media appearance, that goes into a rotation on their social media, in their newsletters. So people are constantly reminded that this is a person who is pulled up as an authority. That is such an easy course correct. And people do so much work to get more visible. And then they have the experience and it goes into the abyss.
Yeah.
And no one ever sees it again. And that's such an easy thing to start fixing. So all this stuff you've done in the past, let's pull it back out to the front, because you most likely are having evergreen content and suggestions and guidance. So if this is a great interview, introduce it in a different way.
Talk about evergreen content.
So evergreen content is content that is as relevant today as it will be 5 years from now. So what we're talking about now, how important it is for presentation skills in visibility, how important visibility is in advancement. That is evergreen content. Those things are here to stand true. So you, for instance, if you did a podcast or a speaking engagement, that automatically, once it's finished, once we thank the event planner, once we've asked them if someone else who would be a great suggestion for another speaking engagement, like we want to utilize the people who like working with us, right? So once we've done all that, put that into your social media rotation so that you can remind people that this is happening. And it's also very flattering for whoever hosted that event.
Yes,
because
exactly.
they're seen again. They understand that you are committed to building a relationship with them. Everything comes down to having great relationships and having great content. And the way that you do that is by being helpful. And I love that suggestion you brought up earlier about, if you want to speak somewhere and maybe you're not quite ready, or you don't quite have the audience, or you don't quite feel like your content's ready, email that person and make a great suggestion for a speaker. Start building the relationship with the event
I
planner.
think you could say, what was that date again? Oh, shucks, I'm already booked. And maybe you're already booked finishing the script, but, finishing writing the speech. But, oh, shucks, I'm already booked. Could we try for next month? And in the meantime, here's who you could use.
Yes. Here's someone who would be a great fit. A couple of other easy things that people can do. Everyone needs to have Google alerts set for your industry. And for literally the phrase call for speakers. Every single day in my inbox, I get call for speakers, Google alerts. And you need to make those specific to your industry. That is a 0 effort way to understand what's going on in your own sector. And then you take a quick minute, look, is it something you want to pursue? Great. If not, you can move on. That takes 30 seconds out of your day. There's a lot of great websites that curate speaking gigs. I'm sure that you've spoken about several of them, but there are places like Speaker Match.
I have not spoken about them. So do these websites that curate, being on Speaker Hub or Speaker Match or something. I know some people for whom it's been great, and I know a lot of people who've never heard anything since.
I think it depends on what type of gigs you're looking for and how you're going to utilize them. So, for instance, let's say there's a large summit. You're not going to get paid for it. But is that the right audience you want to get in front of? Because you should never have a speaking engagement or a podcast interview or a media interview where you don't make money in some way. And what I mean by that is there's either a really great call to action, so people are coming over to you, or you are using that interview to remind your audience that you're the authority and get booked for something paid in that way.
Well, and actually, one of the things that a lot of people don't think about is maybe the audience is not your audience, but the other speakers are. The other speakers or the organizers. If that's one of the reasons for doing, for saying yes to a speaking gig, is if the organizers are people who could get you to the speaking gig you really want. I have upon occasion done speaking gigs for the sake of one person. That was the one person I wanted to reach. Anybody else who I could reach would be great, but it was really, I wanted that one person to see that I could do a good job. So, that's another way to think of it. Let me just go back to catch on something what you said about being paid. How do you find the paid speaking gigs?
So a really great way to do that is, again, look to the other people who are speaking in your space.
Mm-hmm.
If they are tied to a speakers bureau, that's amazing, because 9 out of 10 times a speakers bureau will list their fee range. So you're going to know that John Green, if he spoke at a conference that you wanted to, if you go look at his speakers bureau website and it's $10,000 to $15,000. Okay, we know that John is getting on that stage for $10,000 to $15,000. That is probably the budget that company has for that rate. So it's doing a little bit of investigative work that isn't hard, but it can be very meaningful in not leaving money on the table. A lot of things that people do that I'm sure you have seen is they negotiate against themselves. You should always enter any sort of conversation around speaking with, and what budget do you have reserved for speakers?
Yeah.
We need to set the precedence that there is that expectation, and people wait to do that, or they start negotiating against themselves, meaning, well, my normal fee is $5,000, but for you, I'll do it for $2,500.
Yeah.
That, like, oh, that drives me insane. Like, don't do that. They didn't even come back. And what if their budget was $10,000? So little things like that, but thinking about where to find these gigs. So, we need to think about destination management companies, SHRM, depending on your industry, association.
SHRM is the Society for Human Resources Management.
Yes.
For my international listeners. Yes.
Yes. Thank you for spelling that out. These large hotel conferences, 95% of those speakers are paid speakers. So you can be thinking about this all the time. If you're traveling on vacation, go to your hotel and just see what conferences are hosted there. That's a really great way to understand, oh, okay, so we'll have to come back here. You can develop a relationship right there in 10 minutes with the event planner. You're already at the hotel. So it's changing your mindset and understanding that everything is a potential opportunity to meet someone who could connect you to a speaking opportunity or get to an event that needs speakers. But as far as payment, I think the fastest way, aside from a curated service that does it, is looking at the competition and what their fees are. So you understand what kind of money we're working with, because, the gamut ranges. I mean, your celebrity speakers are getting anything from 80 to 150,000 a gig.
Yeah.
Those are celebrity speakers. That's a whole different thing. But
if they had Bill Clinton last time, they might not be spending that kind of money on you.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's think about that. We're looking at the keynotes here. But it's work that if you happen to have an assistant, once you lay out very specifically where you want to be, instead of I want speaking gigs, that is absolutely something that an assistant can help with to free up your time to be developing the relationships that you need to get you on that stage. So that's where your time would be best spent.
And here's actually a point I should make about this is when you're working with a service. So to be transparent, you have been helping me find more podcasts. Assume it will take 4 to 6 weeks for you to know enough about each other to find the right ones. To find the right ones, especially if your topic is not the standard topic. It's like, a lot of the people, I find myself, I'm in a very specific niche. And I have so many speaker friends who speak to a different audience. And so people are saying, oh yeah, come on my podcast. And I go, yes, but that's not my audience.
There's only 24 hours in a day.
Yeah. Or people who say, oh, Elizabeth, you have a podcast. I have a great person for you. And I go, yeah, you should know who my audience is. and actually there are a couple of podcast booking companies that I have written back to and said, hi, I'd be happy to talk about your people, but you need to do your homework. This is not who and sometimes I never hear from them again, but there are a couple of groups, you are one, to say, who will say, okay, I know who you're looking for. Who are the people who also address your audience? Who would be a good fit? Who would be a good fit for your podcast? That's another.
Those are great questions to ask.
Yeah.
Something like, so a little insider trick going back to how to leverage the competition. The misconception that people have about speakers bureaus do not create demand. They manage demand. So anyone who is with a speakers bureau, they need someone to manage the demand that's already happening. So that's a really great opportunity to go on a speakers bureau. Don't look for it for yourself. Look and see who's in my category, who is speaking for the same fees that I am wanting to speak for. Where are they speaking? Because that's going to be listed.
Yeah.
That's a really fast way to get a direct list, and then give that to your assistant and start outreach. Who's the person that I need to talk to about speaking at your company? That is a lightning quick way to get a curated list.
And another thing about working with an assistant is that you've got to take the time to train that assistant, so that that assistant needs to learn what you're doing. I have 3 assistants who do a lot of work for me, and one of them is very specifically works on booking, and it took us 3 months to find out, to just get it all figured out. But now she's great. But you do have to put in the time. Yeah, you just have to learn. If you put in the time
in the beginning, it will start to snowball. And that's the thing about speaking and PR and all of it. It starts to snowball once you hit that runway and really get a cadence. Then it truly does become easy. And it's just about managing at that point.
Yeah. Okay. Whitney McDuff, how can we find out more? There are listeners who want to get some help or just have a conversation with you about how to get that great speech out there.
I love it. You can find me anywhere on the internet at Whitney McDuff. I'm at whitneymcduff.com. All of my social handles are Whitney McDuff. So I'm very easy to find. That is by design. If you want to have a conversation, I would love to help people get their message into the world.
Great. Thank you so much for having been a guest on Speakers Who Get Results, and especially as the crowning finale to the Visible and Valued Training Month. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. And let me remind you that if you are curious how your presentation skills are doing, you can take our free assessment at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where you are strong in your presentation skills and where perhaps a little support could get you the results you need and the recognition you deserve. This has been Elizabeth Bachman. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.